Brownia remain standing. And those who will, let us pray. In this quiet, we stand amid these time-honored walls, a newly formed generation of Brown. Stand with us. In this season of time-honored beginnings, we ask that our chronometers be harmonized, that culture and practice thread together to make of this season a circle of scholarship, imagination, engagement, discipline, irreverent proposal, and sacred regard. We stand together, both the newly arrived and those who with gratitude arrive anew at long-honored posts. But we stand together in the middle, in hope. Make this hope useful, each to the other, and to the beloved and yearning world from which we have come apart a little, but in whose pulsing life we find our own lives. May the shadows of this time be transient. May our endeavors be radiant. May we be steadfast in the pursuit of such offices as life may offer, to which we may lend usefulness and reputation. Be mercy among us. Be encouragement, be instruction. May all who strive radiate their own hope, that this rising generation may find its work and place and dreams a blessing in the life of a beloved world. So help us, Brown. May we each be the others, and in being so, belong to a much larger purpose in life. So bless this generation of Brown and bless our world. Amen. Please be seated.
Chancellor Tisch, fellows and trustees of the corporation, faculty, staff, alumni, parents, and students, it is my great pleasure as president of Brown University to declare the opening of the 246th academic year. I extend a special welcome to the members of the entering classes of the graduate school, the medical school, and the college. Among them are 97 brilliant medical students, 566 learned graduate students, 6 dedicated RU students, 93 very wise and perceptive transfer students, and of course, 1,497 exceptional first-year students who may help to make up the phenomenal class of 2013. Energized by your immense potential as scholars and humanitarians, we are privileged indeed to have you all here. Whatever your level of study, you join a vibrant community of scholars, researchers, teachers, and innovators. Along with all of them, you further Brown's mission and its famed legacy of academic excellence and innovation. What you bring to this learning environment is beyond measure. What we hope to bring to you are the resources to enlarge upon your many talents and develop your unique path to achievement. You will be aided in your endeavors by an outstanding faculty. I am especially pleased to welcome new faculty today who, from all that I can discern from having met many of them, bring extraordinary expertise to inspire you, mentor you, and guide you toward the excellence you seek. Just as you have worked hard to get here, so are the faculty working hard to ensure that you are intellectually challenged and fortified during your time in this community. Brown, as you know, has excelled in higher education for 245 years. But these 245 years have not been without difficulties. Last year's economic crisis will no doubt be recorded in the annals of economic history as one of the most perplexing, difficult, and terrifying periods of our time. Yet after feeling the effects of this crisis, we open this year with renewed confidence in the health, vitality, and future promise of this university. Those financial difficulties tested us as they tested every institution in the country, but they also revealed to us the remarkable strength of Brown, a strength that originates and resides in the grit and determination, the generosity and involvement, the humanity and intelligence of the Brown community here and across the world. Indeed, in the midst of the crisis, a generous donor came forward to contribute $30 million for financial aid. It is this kind of commitment that enables Brown to improve steadily in its offerings, to diversify its student body, and to add to the storehouse of knowledge and talent available to the world. While most students and faculty were away this summer, there was a lot going on the campus. Renovation of Rhode Island Hall was completed to accommodate the Artemis A.W. and Martha Sharp Joukowsky Institute for Archaeology and the Ancient World. The transformation of Fawn's House began with the Blue Room being relocated to the basement level as major construction goes on the upper floors. And I'm pleased to tell you today that the Stephen Robert Campus Center will open earlier than we initially expected. All work will actually be completed in time for the beginning of the 2010-2011 academic year. The Creative Arts Building, to be named for Marty and Perry Granoff, is rising along the walk. Medical students at Brown will soon have their very own medical education building, and work on a home for mind-brain behavior is underway, with construction to begin in 2010. And finally, a new swimming and fitness center will rise on the previous site of the pool once the plans are approved by the corporation. Now, I cite these projects to give you a sense of the movement that continues, because our faculty and students, our corporation and volunteers, and our wonderful staff did not permit last year's crisis to stop our forward momentum. And I now want to thank especially Chancellor Tom Tisch for his generous and wise leadership throughout the crisis, and along with the extraordinary corporation for insisting that this university keep pushing ahead in the face of the immense uncertainty of that period. Tom, thank you very much. I know that as you have wandered around the campus these last few days, you have been thrilled, as I have been, to see how wonderful the campus looks. So I also want to thank Steve Mayorisi and his colleagues in facilities who worked throughout the summer and the year to make improvements in time for your arrival. They do a marvelous job, and I hope you'll help me to acknowledge that. Thank you to all the facility staff. This year, the fallout from the financial crisis will continue as universities gird themselves for continued reductions to address the dramatic loss of revenue due to smaller endowments. Those who are returning this year may, in their day-to-day experiences, notice a few changes due to these reductions. Events may be less lavish, services may be somewhat slower, programs may be slightly fewer. In fact, I was saying to somebody, you know, we really don't need to have shrimp at the faculty reception. People were very upset when I said that, but what's a shrimp or two, right? Okay, maybe not. Remember that uppermost in our efforts will be the need to preserve our ability to support you and faculty in the central work of this university. If we can, by making such adjustments, preserve things of greater value to our community, we can and must do that. As I said to many of you on Sunday, this is the opportunity of a lifetime. I hope you will take full advantage of the resources available to you and thoughtfully seek the experiences that truly matter in expanding your knowledge and understanding of this extraordinarily complex world. I look forward to watching you grow, create, explore, debate, and above all, excel in the months ahead. Now, it gives me great pleasure to introduce someone who offers strong evidence of why it is so important to protect our academic priorities. Today's keynote speaker, Johanna Schmitt, is the Stephen T. Olney Professor of Natural History and Director of Brown's Environmental Change Initiative. Professor Schmitt joined the Brown faculty in 1982 after completing her bachelor's degree at Swarthmore, her PhD at Stanford, and postdoctoral work at Duke. During her time at Brown, she has taught, mentored, and conducted research with scores of students who have gone on to productive careers in academia, research, and conservation. She has been an advisor for 48 senior theses and a number of undergraduate independent study projects, and has also worked on more than 30 publications with undergraduate co-authors. Her scores of published articles in leading journals attest to the reach and import of her research. She has lectured widely around the world and served as visiting researcher at the Max Planck Institute for Plant Breeding and at Imperial College. A fellow of the American Association for the Advancement of Science and the National Academy of Sciences, she served as president of both the Society for the Study of Evolution and the American Society of Naturalists. Professor Schmitt's service to her profession and the university, as well as her collaboration with faculty and scientists at Brown across the country and around the world, distinguish her as one of the most productive and distinguished members of the Brown faculty. Her research focuses on natural plant populations, their evolution, and possible adaptations to global climate change. She is currently a co-principal investigator on an NSF grant on the molecular evolutionary ecology of developmental signaling pathways in complex environments. Her address today will focus on natural selection in an age of global change. Please join me in welcoming her to this podium.
Thank you, President Simmons. President Simmons, Provost Kurtzer, Chancellor Tisch, faculty colleagues, friends, members of the Brown community, and particularly all of you who've just walked for the first time through those gates, and most particularly the extraordinary class of 2013. Give yourself another hand. Welcome to the 246th opening of the academic year at Brown. So think about that for a minute. 245 classes have been here before you, have stood on this green. And as those generations have come and gone, Brown itself has evolved as an institution through great historic events and eras of social change. So as I stand here before you today, I think about all my former students who've walked in through these gates and 4 years later walked out through those gates and went on to do great things. And now you've become a part of that same great flow. It's very exciting. So today is the beginning of 4 life-altering years for many of you. And I invite you to stop, turn off the cell phones, and mark this moment and commit today to making the very most of those extraordinary 4 years. So you've arrived at Brown at a really extraordinary year, as President Simmons said. This is a year of political change, of economic uncertainty on a global level. And this is also a year when the accelerating effect of global climate change is becoming absolutely undeniable. And future generations are going to judge us how we respond to these challenges. So your time at Brown is going to be against the background of profoundly important world events that will determine the future of our country and of the planet. But this year is also the bicentennial of Charles Darwin's birth and the 150th anniversary of the publication of his great book on the origin of species by means of natural selection. Darwin's ideas revolutionized the world, and they're more relevant than ever today. They've changed science, they've led to major advances in many fields, from genomics to medicine. So it's very fitting that in the year of Darwin, that the first reading selection for you, the class of 2013, was Jonathan Weiner's The Beak of the Finch, which is a really fascinating account of natural selection and evolution, focusing on a remarkable group of birds and a remarkable set of investigators studying Darwin's finches on the Galapagos Islands. And it's probably no coincidence that President Simmons, in her infinite wisdom, invited me, an evolutionary scientist, to speak to you at this year's convocation. I'm really honored and humbled by this, and I'll try to do my best to this assignment. If my speech doesn't blow away, as the provost has warned me it might. So today I would like to say a few words about Darwin's great theory and what it means for us in the 21st century, a century in which humans are transforming the environment at an utterly unprecedented rate. And I will also invite each of you to contemplate your own relationship with science and scientific evidence in a century where scientific evidence will be essential for making policy decisions about some of the most pressing problems of our time. Finally, in the long tradition of convocation speakers before me, I'm going to try to slip in a little bit of gratuitous advice at the end, so try to stay awake till then. Charles Darwin had two great insights which changed the course of science and society. And the first insight was the principle of evolution by natural selection, and this is a principle that was emphatically upheld by the scientific research described in The Beak of the Finch. The idea is simple but very powerful. Nature acts as a selective agent, causing individuals with favored traits to survive better and produce more offspring. And if those traits are heritable, inherited from parent to offspring, then natural selection in one generation will cause evolutionary change in the next. This is a very simple idea, but now we know how well it works. And actually, a very famous early example of natural selection in action was discovered right here in Providence by a Brown professor, Professor Herman Carey Bumpus, in 1898. He was just down there at the Providence Athenaeum in January after a big ice storm. He was walking by and he found a flock of English house sparrows that had been knocked down by the storm. So like a typical scientist, he picked them all up, brought them back into the lab, and waited to see what happened. And some survived and some did not. And when he measured them, he discovered that the living were morphologically different from the dead. So what Professor Bumpus had discovered was that natural selection could act in a single night, very rapidly. Okay, well, did that selection result in evolutionary change? We don't know the answer because Professor Bumpus didn't go and measure the next generation. But his data, which then were famous data and were reanalyzed by modern statistics, inspired the great evolutionary biologists Peter and Rosemary Grant to do their long-term study of selection and evolution in the Darwin's finches on the Galapagos, where Darwin, of course, visited and is described in The Beak of the Finch. And the Grant's work and that of many other evolutionary biologists provides utterly convincing evidence that natural selection acts frequently and strongly in nature and can result in rapid evolutionary change. And since that book was written in 1994, the evidence has become even more overwhelming. So from Darwin's finches to fish to bacteria to weeds to pests of crops, everywhere natural selection acts in real time to produce rapid evolutionary change, and this has huge consequences for us. And in some cases, it leads to the origin of species. And modern genomic techniques now in the 21st century allow us to identify the very specific genes responsible for these changes and to track their evolutionary history. For evolutionary biologists like me, this is a very, very exciting time. But what does evolution by natural selection mean for all of us here in the 21st century? Okay, well, those of you who read The Beak of the Finch have seen how climate change, in this case a very strong El Nino event, exerted strong natural selection on Darwin's finches, resulting in rapid directional evolution. Is there something I don't know? That's one of my advisees down there, and she's laughing at me. Okay. So today the Earth is rapidly warming as a result of our greenhouse gas emissions. So this is more than an El Nino. There will be many, many El Ninos to come. And human activities have transformed the face of the planet. So now evolution is really important. Whether many species are going to survive or whether they're going to go extinct depends on whether they can evolve fast enough to keep up with this rapid environmental change. So we as a species are conducting a series of huge unplanned evolutionary experiments, and you're going to see some of the outcomes in your lifetimes. And some of those experiments have already produced results. For example, the rapid, pervasive, and very dangerous evolution of antibiotic resistance in bacteria. So if you're here to train to become a physician, be aware that you're going to have to confront the results of evolution in your daily practice. Darwin's second revolutionary insight, a very profound one. A great tree of life descended and diverged from a single ancient common ancestor. This is also a very simple but very profound idea. So it means that we have to think of ourselves as just one twig as a species, one twig on one branch of that ever-growing tree. And so contrary to the very common misperception of the theory of evolution, we did not evolve from the apes. Rather, some millions of years ago, humans and chimpanzees diverged evolutionarily from a common ancestor. And then in turn, that common ancestor was descended from the common ancestor of all the great apes. And so backwards on in time to the ancestor of all mammals and all animals and ultimately all life on Earth. So, and again, the scientific evidence in support of this theory is absolutely overwhelming, from the fossil record to the DNA sequences. This is something that we know with pretty much certainty. But this has profound implications. To me, this is just a humbling and awe-inspiring view of life. What it means is that by different degrees, we're related to all the other beings on this planet. They're our relatives. But in the 21st century, twigs and even whole branches are being pruned at a rapid rate from the tree of life. Rates of species lost today are as high as they were during the 6 ancient mass extinction events seen in the fossil record, such as the asteroid impact that is thought to have contributed to the, basically wiped out the dinosaurs. In the United States, 29% of native plant species are considered to be threatened with global extinction. And within Rhode Island, this is something I did as a study, just looked it up when I was going to be talking with Senator Chafee a few years ago about the Endangered Species Act. 5% of Rhode Island native species historically present have now vanished from the state. It's a small state, but 5% is still a big number. And recent research suggests that certain branches of the tree of life may be far more vulnerable to extinction than others, the ancient group of cycads, for example. So life survived the mass extinctions of the past, and it will still be here long after we're gone. But it will take many billions of years for evolution to replace the diversity that is being lost rapidly today. And entire ancient lineages will be lost forever. I think that's very sad. We as a species are profoundly altering the course of evolution and the future history of life on the planet. So there's no question today that evolution has shaped us and the world that we live in today, and that it has major consequences for our daily lives. And yet, 150 years after the publication of The Origin, Darwin's theory remains controversial in this country. So let me be perfectly clear here. This is no longer a scientific controversy. The predictions generated by the theory of evolution have been repeatedly tested against scientific facts, and the theory has held fast. The vast majority of scientists accept the theory of evolution based upon multiple lines of overwhelming scientific evidence, just as we accept the Copernican theory that the Earth revolves around the sun. But we do face a social controversy in this country about how to reconcile the teaching of scientific fact with religious belief. And a Gallup poll on Darwin's birthday this February showed that only 39% of the American public overall believes in the theory of evolution, So why such a divergence between this scientific evidence and popular belief? And I'm sure there's a diversity of opinion here on the screen as well. Perhaps because, think about the wording of the poll, we're treating evolution here as a belief, not as a scientific theory that has already been tested. And here I'm going to draw a little bit upon a recent speech I heard by Dr. Eugenie Scott, the director of the National Center for Science Education. And I refer you to that website for wonderful information on evolution and creationism and the controversy. And Dr. Scott pointed out that believe is a word that we usually apply to matters of faith or opinion, not to scientific evidence. So to paraphrase and personalize Dr. Scott's remarks, I accept the theory of evolution based upon many lines of scientific evidence, including some that come from my own laboratory. I accept the theory that the Earth revolves around the sun. I accept the scientific evidence to date that atmospheric carbon dioxide levels and global temperatures have risen over the last century. But I believe in the separation of church and state. I believe that we should all reduce our carbon footprints to slow the rate of global warming. I believe that important policy decisions, such as a decision to go to war, for example, should be based upon hard facts, not upon what we would like to believe. I believe in the future of Brown. I believe that if each of you learn to test your beliefs and allow them to evolve in the face of evidence, you'll be better prepared to go out and make a real difference in the world and make those tough decisions in a good way. So to frame the theory of evolution as a matter of belief, not scientific evidence, to me is to blur the boundaries between religion and science in a way that does disservice to both. If you don't believe in evolution on religious grounds, I respect your religious beliefs. Brown is an inclusive place. My nieces and nephews in rural Ohio were raised as fundamentalist Christians. We love each other dearly. We agree to disagree. But I want to say to you what I say to them. There's nothing in the theory of evolution that's incompatible with religious faith. And I urge you to read the book Finding Darwin's God by Professor's own Ken Miller, over there in a yellow robe somewhere, who makes that argument far more eloquently than I ever could. The existence of a creator is a matter of faith, or the non-existence of a creator is a matter of faith that cannot be proven or disproven by scientific evidence. So you should not be afraid to examine the evidence for evolution. And on the other hand, if you believe in evolution, because that's kind of the default position here in this liberal East Coast environment, I also say to you, examine the evidence. Decide for yourself whether it supports Darwin's theory. Don't just believe in it because your peers do or your parents do. Examine the evidence. So some people say very bleak implications for human society in the theory of evolution. As a literal-minded scientist, for example, I'm not sure I completely understand Low Anthem's lyrics about Charlie Darwin, but I can tell that they're kind of depressing. But if Darwin is right, does this mean that we are all engaged in a perpetual struggle for existence in which only the fittest will prosper? Does it mean that selfish behavior will always be rewarded at the expense of the common good, like the destruction of the food supply on the island of Genovesa by a handful of selfish cactus finches? Okay, I would argue that this is an overly simplistic view, and especially when we take culture and learning into account. Modern evolutionary theory, it's developed since Darwin. Modern evolutionary theory is beginning to show how natural selection can actually operate at multiple levels and may favor groups with high levels of cooperation and altruism. And moreover, in small communities where there's learning and memory and individuals are known to one another, like Brown, selfish behavior may provide a short-term benefit, but at the expense of a much larger long-term cost because your neighbors will remember that behavior and they will react to it. So that leads to my first piece of gratuitous advice. Here in Brown's intimate community, I believe that you will find that cooperation and altruistic behavior will benefit you as well as the people around you and the institution. Think about that in organic chemistry. So I'd like to close by introducing you to another important concept from modern evolutionary theory, and that is the idea of niche construction. This is kind of a new emerging concept. In ecological jargon, an organism's niche is the combination of environmental factors that define where it can live and grow and reproduce. And as some of you have read in The Beak of the Finch, those environmental factors, such as food supply in the case of the finches, can exert very potent natural selection. But in some cases, organisms can evolve the ability to actually construct their own niche, and thus alter the nature of the selective forces that they experience. So for example, a finch that chooses to forage where small seeds are scarce will experience very different selective pressures on beak size than a finch that forages where small seeds are abundant. Okay, well, the most remarkable example of niche construction that I can think of is human culture. Through tool making and language and the structure of our society, we've expanded the range of environments in which our species can live and grow. Without our culture, natural selection would be acting on us very differently today. So this leads to my second and last piece of gratuitous advice, which is construct your own niche at Brown. So by choosing to come here, you have already consciously chosen an environment that will influence the trajectory of your entire life. You have already, to some extent, constructed your niche. Now your mission should be not simply to find your niche within the institution, like Darwin's finches choosing the seeds that are most suited to their beaks. Although that's probably the major function of shopping period, I think. Rather, I challenge you to consciously construct an environment where you can evolve into the person that you want to be. So every choice you make, the classes you take, the books you read, the activities you join, the friends you make, and most importantly, the way you behave towards other members of this small community, these are all a form of niche construction. So be mindful of these choices and construct for yourself a niche where you will be able to thrive and evolve and help to make Brown a better place and go out to make the world better. And what better day to start than today? Thanks very much.